What if love is not a feeling or a concept like we've often been taught? This is what becomes possible when soul sickness heals, when love is no longer something we perform, but something we inhabit. The model of love we've been taught was never designed to help you thrive. There's a woman sitting at her kitchen table on a Sunday morning. Her tea's gone cold, and she's realizing that she cannot remember the last time she felt truly loved. Not simply approved of or appreciated for what she does, but loved simply for who she is. What if love is not a feeling or a concept like we've often inferred or been taught, but a presence, an actual being that we can be in relationship with? In this episode, we're going somewhere most conversations about love don't go. We're going into the territory of what love actually is, why it's so terribly difficult to both give and receive love, and what opens in us when we begin to meet love as a living being rather than something we have to earn or manufacture. If you've been with me through the last episodes, you know that we've been talking about the 7 keys to reclaim your soul. We've grounded ourselves with key number 1. We've made space and begun to claim our sovereignty with keys 2 and 3. And now we're stepping into the heart of the journey, literally. Welcome to Soul Knows the Way, a podcast for women in the second half of life who sense a soul hunger they can no longer ignore, a longing for depth, truth, and a life lived from the inside out. I'm Kim Marie, soul guide, author, and I'm here to walk that journey with you. So let's talk about love. That woman sitting at the table, she may feel somewhat familiar, and she may have familiar patterns, or we could even say symptoms of what she might be feeling or have been feeling before she got to that point of wondering why she doesn't feel loved. Maybe she gave love to earn a sense of safety or approval or belonging. Maybe she learned to love others by disappearing herself. Maybe she said, "I love you," and didn't really believe it about her own self, or said it in a way that it kind of felt rote. It didn't feel really authentic on some level, or as deep as she wanted it to feel. Or she heard the words, "I love you," and couldn't quite let them land. She probably tried a lot of self-love practices, the affirmations, the baths, the journaling, and still felt kind of disconnected from what she knew was possible in terms of this sense of love that she had within her. She could probably give endlessly, but maybe struggled, didn't know how to really receive. Maybe she loved what she was supposed to love, but not necessarily what her soul loved. We feel guilty for needing love, or for wanting more love, or for not feeling loved enough, or worst of all, for not being able to love more. That Sunday morning recognition, that Sunday morning contemplation is not just a feeling. It's a surfacing of a lifetime of conditional love finally being seen for what it is, which really comes from the culture, the overculture, our family, religion, etc. It's not our fault. Our culture, actually, the modern world, not very good at really helping us relate or connect with love. In fact, the Greeks had 8 words, I believe, for love. Multiple words, eros, philia, agape, and we have one. We have one word for so many different expressions. And I want to speak about the notion that while we're talking in some ways about what love actually means, I don't think any of us can really define it. I'm not sure any of us really know exactly what it means. Our interpretation of love in the modern world tends toward romance and possession. Well, not surprising, given that we are living in a very dominance and control kind of culture. We're obsessed with a more idealized love, a love that tries to solve us, to fix us, to sweep us off our feet, right? It's also, sadly, often a love that disregards wisdom and follows feeling or instinct without discernment. This is more impulsive. It doesn't have the depth that brings us to our choices and our actions. We've had centuries of this. And because of that, our culture chases love as more of a sensation and never cultivates a deep relationship with love as a living force. We're taught conditional love, that love is earned, that it's given for certain behaviors that we act upon or express or do in the world. And as all too common, it is withheld as punishment. That's what we often learn growing up in our modern culture, sadly. That conditioning keeps us in a sense of soul sickness. And one of the biggest indicators of soul sickness in our culture is codependency. And I talk about this a lot in my work, this notion that we want to be in a state of interdependence, but instead we get stuck in these roles of the codependency triangle. Many of us have heard of this codependency triangle where we're kind of dancing between the roles of victim, perpetrator, or rescuer. And these three roles are what we dance within when love is conditional and the soul is not at the center. One of the most visible symptoms of soul sickness with others, ourselves, and life is this codependency. Most of us played all three roles. Maybe we still do play all three roles. And we can play them in the same week or even the same day. Now, I'm going to come back to where this leads, this notion of codependency and being in these roles of victim, perpetrator, or rescuer, because there's a way out of this triangle that most of us were never shown. We're going to talk about what love actually is and what it's not, with the understanding that none of us can truly define it wholeheartedly. I think more and more of us are learning to meet love, and that's what this episode is really about. I used to feel like that woman at the table with this deep longing to be loved just for who I am, no matter what. And in this longing, I found myself questioning so much. I looked at, well, if I want to be loved just for who I am, who do I struggle to love just for who they are? And why? What made it hard for me to love them wholeheartedly? How might I have behaved inauthentically to give or to receive love? There were a lot of things I could find in those kinds of contemplations. I wondered if I'd ever felt pure, unconditional love, this ideal love that so many talk about. And over time, I started to realize that love was something that was more often talked about as a concept or expressed as a performance or longed for as an ideal. Those were all things outside of me. They weren't something I felt as a part of me. In my work, I've often worked with archetypes through mythology and even the notion of nature beings and elements as archetypes for our soul, and how we can relate more deeply to ourselves and contain all of life within us. And I started to think, well, I'm not really containing or feeling this love within me as part of me. So I started to relate with love as a being, as an essence, as a presence, rather than trying to understand it or conceptualize it. I began to feel love, to sense love, to recognize its presence. The first time this showed up for me in a really strong way was not long after my divorce. In fact, it was very shortly after the divorce was finalized. And I know this is going to sound strange, and I still struggle to fully explain it because it feels tender and vulnerable, but at the same time, so real for me. When I got married, I loved my husband. I really wanted to marry him. I think so many people get into a marriage certainly never thinking they're going to get divorced. But over time, as so often happens in a relationship, I think when we feel that dissonance that can happen, I always say relationships are such a powerful form of initiation in an age where we don't have initiation rites anymore in the modern world. We're initiated by our relationships. And relationships are such an important way to grow as a person. We're mirrors for each other. And at the same time, we can be in these relationships that just feel so impossible. And that feeling of love that we thought we were supposed to have can start to feel like it's fading, or we don't understand, or we feel like we should love them. And maybe we say we do love them, but nothing in our day-to-day lives feels like love. I know for me, my own lack of feeling loved made me feel like I needed validation. I needed approval. I needed to be shown and reminded that I'm loved. And yet no amount of showing or reminding actually sunk in for me. And ultimately, I began to see that I needed to feel love deeper within myself. And when I started tuning into this idea of love as a presence, as a being to relate with, and then ended up getting divorced, what I found was really felt the presence of love in my divorce more than I had in my marriage. Not because I cared less than I did in the marriage, but because I could feel that love in the letting go of control, in the surrender, in a deeper presence that I could feel holding both of us as we shifted to a new stage in our lives. It's hard for me to describe because I think it's something you simply feel. You feel the presence of. I felt a deeper knowing of him as part of me, truly part of me rather than separate, which is ironic because here we were going our separate ways. It didn't mean that I felt like, oh, am I making a mistake, or is this the wrong thing to do, or is there something else I should be doing? We spent a lot of time determining that this was the right choice for us. It wasn't easy. I don't think divorce is ever easy, but it was the right choice for us at the time. Yet, the concept of divorcing amicably and really wanting him to be happy and setting him free rather than trying to control him or to control the marriage or trying to make everything work or make it the way I wanted it to be because of my own insecurities or my own lack of feeling love was so freeing. It was a setting free of both of us to be who and how and what we actually fully are. So I want to dive deeper into this idea of love as a being, not just a concept. Many of us think of love as an emotion, but it's not primarily an emotion. It's a presence or a force. It's a living intelligence. It's something we feel within us. We almost feel lit up in our cells when it's felt nearby, and it's always nearby, but there's so many other things that can kind of create noise to block that experience of the presence of love. It's a deeper intelligence. It's not an intellectual, conceptual concept. Just as wisdom is not merely good thinking, but it's something we cultivate a relationship with. With love, we can turn toward this being of love. We can listen to love. We can receive from love. I think of love in the way I think of wisdom, as a being, not as something I need to do or to feel or to command, but as a being I can learn to meet and find within me. Love is a being you can meet and you can connect with, not a feeling that you can manufacture like so many of us have been taught. Now, we've been working through, as I mentioned, the 7 keys to reclaim your soul in these most recent episodes. And there's a free download, completely free, to the guide in case you haven't already downloaded it. And each of these 7 keys, named by the acronym RECLAIM, is connected with a chakra in our energetic system. And the love key that we're talking about today, the 4th of our 7 keys, the center of all the 7 keys, is associated with the heart chakra. This is not only a center of love and compassion, it's also a deep place of meaning. It's a place of earth and sky meeting within us. It's a place of matter and spirit coming together within us. It's like a spiritual gateway within us, where we are offered all the divinity of our potential and our divine essence and the capacity to bring that to life. It's like a door of transformation. It's heaven and earth embodied, or our own divinity embodied in sacred union. And it is this potential for sacred union because it's a bridge between the lower three chakras, which gave us the groundedness with the root key, the sense of flow with the empty key, a sense of claiming our sovereignty with the claim key. And it's connected with the upper three, which we're going to get to in the next episodes. Our capacity to articulate, to find our voice, to meet our intuition, and to create meaning by midwifing our lives in the way that our soul intends. And so when we can meet those things, these inspirations that come from above, and these practicalities and grounded expressions that come from below, and that sense of sustenance, there's something that meets in sacred union in the center that we can find in the center. And I believe it's something we relate with, not a concept. The heart is not just where we feel love. It's where ancient wisdom lives. Wisdom infused love, as I like to think of it. It's a love that has no bounds, no defined doctrines, no shoulds. It's a love that when we access it, acts for what is beneficial for all of life. It's not conditional. It's not based on how we behave or how we think or what we say or do. I do want to be clear about what love is not. The love I'm pointing toward, especially when it comes to self-love, is not the kind that gets sold to us. It's not a treat yourself, that's the loving thing to do. It's not writing I'm enough on a sticky note and putting it on your mirror to remind yourself. It's not narcissism and navel gazing dressed up as healing. It's not the love that turns away from hard truths in the name of being gentle with yourself or another. The love that I'm talking about is far more demanding than that and far more sustaining. And it's challenging to have a relationship with it. When we're taught conditional love is how to love. Again, I don't know that any of us can really define conditional versus unconditional love. But what we can say is that conditional love is more like a transaction. I will love you if you behave this way, if you feel this way, if you stay this way, if you see things this way. That conditional love is so divisive. It creates an us and a them. It creates a space of shoulds and expectations. And we get absorbed into this very early on through our families, through our religions, and our overculture. We get absorbed in it through the romantic myth by interpreting things in ways that kind of follow this ideal. Most of us don't know what unconditional love actually is because we never truly experienced it. Or maybe it was so fleeting that we didn't recognize it, or maybe we have recognized it and we're still searching for, like, how do I get that back? How do I get that feeling back? Unconditional love is definitely not naive or passive, in my view. I think it's incredibly wise and it's active. When we can come from that place of unconditional love, there's a sense of being able to hold boundaries, to name what is harmful, to love deeply and refuse to participate or enable harm. This is where we come back in many ways to this codependency triangle I mentioned earlier. We want to shift that into a sense of interdependence. Our roles collapse into the victim, the perpetrator, and the rescuer when love is conditional and sovereignty is absent. When we are enabling, when we are perpetuating these things. And what we really want to do is shift these roles into new roles. We can actually move out of being the victim and become a creator that acts from a sense of inner authority and takes responsibility for her experience. We can move away from being a perpetrator that accuses others or attacks others or creates harm and dissension and division. We can move into being a challenger that really loves clearly enough to hold up a mirror and say the hard truths, that, can name the hard truths within themselves, but also refuse anything out there that diminishes, that chooses to transcend rather than to fight. We have so much of this fighting, and it's dressed up in the name of advocacy because we have to do the right thing. But so few people are actually asking the questions that challenge the status quo, that wonder why someone thinks one way is right and not another. We just decide we know the right way, and then we attack based on thinking that's how everyone should be. We can shift from being a rescuer or a savior, as it's often called as well, into being more of a beacon. We don't have to fix anyone. We don't have to save anyone. We don't have to jump in on some kind of rescue mission. But we can show up in our own fullness, not to rescue, but to illuminate what is possible, to be a model for what is real and loving and wise in this world. And when we can bring that into our full being, we become a beacon so naturally. This is what becomes possible when soul sickness heals, when love is no longer something we perform, but something we inhabit. Now, I want to talk a little about true self-love here, because our inner critic is one of love's greatest obstacles. And it's almost always the voice of conditional love turned on ourselves. Self-love, in the soul sense, the way I see it, it's not the same as self-care, taking those baths, taking a nap, getting a pedicure, treating yourself to something. It's really more about no longer being willing to abandon any part of yourself. In other words, the flawed parts, the failed parts, the frightened parts, the parts that you'd rather not look at. Loving all of yourself is not about approving of everything. We're not saying yes to everything. It's about refusing to abandon any part of you. The shadows, the wounds, the places you'd rather not look at. Love can actually hold all of that. It's feeling and accepting something fully within yourself as part of yourself. I feel like this is part of what I experienced in my divorce. Somehow, my husband became part of me, part of my life. I began to just really appreciate all that I had become, that he had become, that our children had become. I was able to bring him in as a part of me and no longer feel like I needed to save him, rescue him, perpetrate against him, or be a victim of him. None of that. I just felt like when I needed to, I could start to challenge him because I felt love as a presence, as a being. And I could also just be in myself. I didn't have to defend myself. I didn't have to try to change him. And I could just create my new life and let that be enough and not believe that, if only this hadn't happened, I wouldn't have to do these things. It wasn't easy, but that's where that capacity to relate with love led me over time. Now, I believe love, as I mentioned before, is active. It's not just what we feel. It's what we choose. Choosing to be the creator, choosing to be the challenger, choosing to be the beacon instead of any kind of the codependent roles of victim, perpetrator, and savior. Choosing love is definitely not always what's easy. Choosing what's true, what honors life, what acts from wisdom rather than fear is choosing love. So in any ordinary day, we can pause before reacting. We can ask ourselves, what would love respond with? The being of love, not how can I love more? How can I say something loving? How would love speak to me in a way that actually truly feeds me? Because that's what love does. And we can just notice when we're acting from fear versus care. Choosing love is a practice, a daily, imperfect, ongoing practice. And it starts with ourselves and it spills out toward others. So let's do a little embodied practice that we can do right now, just to take a little moment and to take something into your week. more of a felt experience than a concept. If you could bring to mind something about yourself that maybe you've judged or rejected or been ashamed of, I'm not talking about your biggest wounds here, but just something that's real and accessible in this moment. Why do I always say this thing? Why do I seem to get into this situation? Why are my feet this way? I don't know. Choose something that you don't like about yourself or something that you feel is not worthy within yourself, that you don't love within yourself. Notice where the contraction lives in your body. Do you feel contracted in your chest or your throat? Maybe your shoulders end up kind of going into your ears or hunching over because you're feeling this vulnerability. Maybe you feel a pit in your stomach. I want you to now just imagine love as a being, as an essence, as something within you, as something embracing you and surrounding you. It's not a feeling, it's a presence. Try to imagine it as a presence of maybe warmth, a quality of respect, adoration, care, and connection to you. And ask, what if love, this presence, this being, could simply meet this part of you? Not to fix it, not to change it, just meet it. Just be with it. What would the loving thing be? The loving expression be? The loving experience be when you are love, when love is you? You can receive a big breath and allow yourself to just feel that opening, a little yes to that part of yourself that maybe you wanted to reject. This is how it begins. It's not some grand declaration or gesture. It's just one breath of a willingness to embrace the whole of yourself, no matter how uncomfortable that is. The deep version of this work happens with witness, in the presence of relationship, like I mentioned, with community. And it happens in whatever time it takes for an old pattern to actually shift. One breath today can open the door to the journey that continues over the lifetime. So this week, as you move forward and consider this relationship with love, I'd love to invite you, maybe when your inner critic fires up and something, is starting to just beat yourself up, to just pause and ask yourself, what would love say here? When someone asks you how you're feeling, consider really feeling the answer before you speak it. You don't have to share your deepest vulnerabilities with someone else, but how often do we actually tune in to notice how we really are feeling? Let that be an opportunity to notice. Noticing yourself is like noticing love, noticing that presence. Maybe at the end of each day, name a way that you chose love for yourself, for someone else, for life. So this woman sitting at the kitchen table, a few weeks later, she's sitting there again. She's been starting to practice to relate with love a bit. She's done a few small things from love rather than from obligation, and she's noticed. She's noticed a bit of a softening and a freedom she hadn't felt before. I mentioned feeling free when I talked about the love I felt post-divorce. And interestingly, there's evidence that freedom, at its root, is literally about living according to love. The word free comes from the Proto-Indo-European root, pri, which means to love. And the suffix dom, D-O-M, its literal meaning is a statute, a declaration, a judgment. A judgment is often sound, sensible choices. So when we think about freedom, it's an attention, it's a choice, it's a living according to love. I like to think of freedom as the law of love, the statute of love, a declaration of love. I honor that picture in my mind. Many of us want a sense of freedom. And I think this idea of it being connected to love is why so often we think we're going to find it in the concept, the idea the intellectualization, the trying to understand love. They're so intimately connected. When we can embody love's presence, love's beingness, and feel it embodying us, there is something magical that begins to happen. The littlest shifts in perspective and action can change everything, especially where love is involved. When this woman at the table begins to experience these little moments, these little shifts, maybe the relationship she's been trying to fix, instead of meeting with honest love, begins to improve. Maybe she appreciates and loves the body that she's criticized for decades and never said thank you to. Those feet that I mentioned earlier, or some body part that you look at and say, oh, I can't stand this part of me. What if you actually touched that part of you and just gave it this nurturing, this tending, this care, and you felt the presence of love within it and the presence of love within you connecting with it as an actual being? Maybe she's able to integrate parts of her past and herself that she's held in contempt rather than in compassion. Maybe she stops trying to rescue others to avoid feeling her own pain and lets them have their own becoming and lets herself simply be the best of who she knows how to be and is capable of being. Maybe she starts doing even little things for herself from that place of love and no longer from that place of guilt or obligation. She notices it. She feels different. The model of love we've been taught was never designed to help you thrive. It was a model built on transaction rather than truth. The fourth key to reclaim your soul is not about loving better. It's about loving differently, from the inside out. Love sits exactly at the center of the 7 keys to reclaim your soul. We had the ground of our being, the spaciousness that we created, the sovereignty that we claimed. And soon we'll be moving into what love opens for us, a capacity to articulate what we really truthfully need and want and mean, to intuit what is coming to us from other realms, you could say, to midwife our life into the future as a creator. This is our voice, our inner knowing, our capacity to bring forth. Love is the hinge in this whole mix of reclaiming our soul. And without it, the keys before it remain tools. And with it, everything that follows can become a genuine homecoming. We get to come home to ourselves. The women I work with in Solace, when we work around love, especially self-love, this is often what brings some of the deepest healing, not as a concept we talk about, but as a practice we return to and remind ourselves of again and again. And if you sense that you want a deep, sustained kind of support on your journey, know that this exists, this space of solace, and the doors are always open whenever your soul feels ready. There's a link in the description. Be sure to grab your free 7 Keys guide if you haven't. This episode is further elaborated on in the guide. And if you're looking for a free gathering space with other women on this path, the Soulstead is always open and waiting for you. There's also a link in the description to that. You've been trying to earn love your whole life, and you don't need to earn it. You're already made of it. It lives within you. It's longing for you to relate with it. I believe love is not something you find or learn or understand, and certainly not something to identify with. It's something we remember, something we build a relationship with. Every time you choose it, even imperfectly, even for one breath, you're coming home to a deeper knowing within yourself. Love is a presence you can come home to, you can relate with again and again. Imagine yourself 1 year from now, 1 year from this moment, the same Sunday morning, maybe you're that person sitting at your own table. And you aren't even asking yourself if you feel loved or are needing loved. You simply feel its deep, inherent presence within and all around you. And you know you are so blessed. Next time we step into key number 5 to reclaim your soul. This is about articulating. Your soul has a voice, and it's not only about words. So I'll see you there to explore more of that together. Until next time, keep tuning into the language of soul, because soul knows the way.